Hello and welcome. I'm Raghav and today we will learn about how to read files in Groovy. So in file input and output we have topics on how to read files and how to write files. So in today's session I'm going to cover how to read files, and in the next session I will cover how to write files in Groovy. So this is going to be very interesting, and in a very easy way I will show you how to read files as string, as list, as array, how to read files line by line, and then finally how to delete files. So this is going to be very interesting. So let's get started. I will go to my Eclipse, and this is the Groovy project we created earlier. I'm going to go to this package, do a right click, go to new, others, and search for Groovy, and you can select Groovy class if you have the option, otherwise select Groovy type and say next. And here I am selecting Groovy class and I will give a class name. I will say this is read file and say finish. So this is our Groovy script. I will remove the class. I can do coding without the class, and here we can start writing our code to read file. So to read a file, let me create a file. So I will go to my project and I will do a right click. You can create a file at any location. I'm just creating a file within the project, and I will go to new and I will select file and I can give it any name. I will say this is data1.txt and say finish. So you can see this is our file here, data1.txt, and here I can write some data. So I will say this is, I'll say line 1, line 2 and line 3. So I have just added 3 lines here, and I will save this and come back to our Groovy script. So now here we can start writing our code. So here I will say this is on reading files, and the first thing I'm going to show you is how to directly read a file as string. So the first thing I will do is I will take the path of the file and I will store it in a variable called file path. And here if you go to your file, now because this is into the root of my project, I can directly just give the file name here. For example, if I say data 1.txt, they should work fine. However, if you want, you can also give an absolute path. So if I do a right click on my file, go to properties, and you can see this is the absolute location. So I can also give this absolute location here. So I'll go here and just provide this absolute location of my file, and I'm on Windows, so I will either have to use a double backslash, or I can also use a single forward slash in the file path. It is recommended that you use a single forward slash so that it will work on Mac and Linux systems as well. So I'm just changing all the backslashes to a single forward slash, and that's it. So this is our file path, and then I will say I'll use the class file and give any name. My file equals new file, and in the brackets I can give the file path. So that's it. You can directly give a file path directly here in the like the string here, or you can also just store it separately and then give it here. Now I have my file here. I will start reading entire content as string. So you can read your entire content of the file as string, and for that I will say my file dot txt. So text is the function, and if I want to print it, I will just say println my file dot text, and I will do a right click, run as Groovy script, and it should be println. I will run it again, and you can see it is printing the entire content of our file. So this is how you can just read as a string, and then you can also collect lines into a list. So if you want to collect all your data in the file into a list, you can just say I will create a list. I will say def list, and I will say my file dot collect. So collect is a function here. So here I will just use collect, and I will use a closure and give an iterator IT. So this will collect the entire data into this list, and then I can just print it. I will say println list, or to make it visible on the console I can also just say list and then the actual content with $list. If I run this now, here you can see the entire data has come into a list. So this is how you can also use lists. And then if you want to store file content in an array, you can also do that. And for storing into an array, we have to say I will create a array and I will say my file as string array. So I will say string and the square bracket. So this is a array of strings. So our data of the file will be stored into a string array, and I can also print it. So I will just say println array and dollar array, and I will run this, and you can see this is now a array of strings and our file data is stored in this array. So this is how you can store in an array. And then you can also read file into a list of string, and for that we can say I will say def lines equals my file dot read lines. So this read lines is another function that will just store the entire content into a list of strings. So if I print this, I will say lines and dollar lines. So this is another way of storing your file data into a list of string, and you can see this is again giving us the same output. So this is how you can also store as list of strings. Now until now we have been doing a direct storage or reading of our file data. You can also read your file line by line. So here I will show you read file line by line, and for that I can say my file dot each line. So each line is a function and we can use a closure with it. And I hope you have learned about closures in the earlier session. Otherwise you can check that. And here I will just say line and a hyphen and an arrow, and then I will say I can just print the line here. So this should print our line, and let me also say here line dollar line. So if I run this now, you can see it is reading line by line and then printing each line on the console. So this is how you can read each line, and then you can read file line by line with line number as well. So you can also use the same thing with line number. So I will just copy this and paste it again here, and here I will also say line and comma line number. So I will also get the line number. So here I can print the line number. I will say dollar line number and the line. So if I run this now, you can see it is printing the line number and our content. Now this thing you can make use in multiple ways. So for example, I will say I will give a range. I will say line number range equals 2 to 4, and we have already learned about ranges as well. So I'm taking a range 2 to 4, and I'm also taking a list. I will say this is line list and this is an empty list as of now. And now inside this closure I will have a condition. I will say if line number range dot contains line number, then I want to add to the list, so I will say line list dot add, and I want to add the line. So what I'm saying here is I'm checking that if the line number is in the range which is 2 to 4, then I will add the line to the list, and finally once this is done I will print the line list. So I will just say here line list dollar line list. This is println, and I will run this again, and let us see the output. And you can see it has added only line 2 and line 3 in the list because we had the range 2 to 4. So this is how you can practically use it. If you want to add some particular lines based on the range, you can use it like this. And then let me now show you how to read with a reader. So like we use buffer readers in Java and other programming languages, we can also read our file with a reader. So here I can just say my file dot, and we have a function called with reader, and we can use it with a closure, and I will say reader hyphen and arrow, and I will say here, so here I can say reader dot read line, and I will run this. So this actually reads the line. Now to have a practical use, what I will do is I will create a variable line, and here inside this closure I will say I will use while. I will say while, and I will say we have data into the file, so I will use this reader dot read line, and I can also make it equals to the line variable which we have defined here. So I will say line equals to reader dot read line, and I will say if this is not equals to null, if this is not equals to null, so that means whenever there is data in the line and whenever there is a line, so what to do here is I want to just print the line, so I will say print line or println line. So you can see this reader dot read line I'm checking, and I'm storing it into line, and I am also checking this is not equals to null, and until it is not equals to null it will keep on printing the line. So I can say here line dollar line, and I will run this, and you can see it is printing all our lines of the file. So you can use a with reader, and then I can also use a new reader function. So here I will say reading with new reader, and here it will be similar. I can say here, now what is the need of using with new reader? Until all the functions we have seen now, like with reader or each line, all these functions close the input file stream by default. We do not have to manually write a code to close the input file stream. However, if you need to do some operation and want to keep the input file stream open, you can use the new reader. So let me show you an example. I will say def output file, and I will give some new file name. I will say this is data2.txt, and because I have not given the absolute path, it will create it in the project root folder here. And then I will say def reader equals my file dot new reader, and also you can see this is coming from this buffered reader. So here now I will say new file, output file dot append, and I will say reader. And now because with new reader we have to manually close the input stream, so I will say reader dot close. So whenever you have to do some operation and need to keep the input file stream open, you can use new reader. And if I run this now, so here, okay, there should be brackets here. This is close. And now I will run this again. And yes, this is done, and there should be a file getting created here. Let me refresh the project. I will go and refresh, and you can see data 2 is here, and you can also see we have the data. Now the reason we have it 2 times is because the first time we ran our script, it copied the data but it did not close the input stream, and then we did it another time, and that is why we have 2 sets of data, or the data has been copied 2 times. So this is how you can use new reader. And then if you are working with binary files, so when working with binary files, if you want to read or show content as bytes, you can use it something like this. So you can say def, or I can directly say byte and give some variable, and I will say my file dot bytes. So I will convert it into bytes, and then you can just println, and you can just print the data. So if I run this, you will see it in a binary format. I will run this here, and this is how you can see it. So whenever you are working with binary files, you can use this. And if you want to get the size of your file, if you want to get the size in bytes, you can just say my file dot length, and I will print this out. So this will show you the length of your file in bytes, and this is the file size or length in bytes. And then if you want to check if your file is a file or directory, you can use something like my file dot is file function, or my file dot is directory function. So these are the 2 functions that can check whether the resource is a file or a directory. So I can also print this. It will print true or false. And if I run this now, you can see is file is true and is directory is false. So this is how you can check it. And then if you want to get list of files from a directory, you can also do that. So for that you can say new file, and then you can give the directory from where you want to get all the files. So for example, in my system, I will go to desktop, and let me go to this folder test job 1, and there are some files here. So I will copy the location and go to my Eclipse, and here give the location and convert the backslashes to forward slash, and then I will say dot each file and using a closure, and here I will say files, and I will say println files dot get absolute path. So this should be absolute path. Yes. So here I will run this, and you can see it is getting all the absolute paths of all the files in that directory. Now in case you want to recursively display all files in a directory and subdirectory, so I will say recursively display all files in a directory and its subdirectory. So for that, what you can do is you can again say, I can say the same thing. So for example, I want to check from this folder, I will do the same thing, and this time I will use the function each file recurse. You can see this is the function here, each file recurse, and then I will again say file println file dot get absolute path, and save this and run this again, and here you can see it is getting all the file paths recursively. So this is how you can use this each file recurse function. And now if you want to copy file data to another file, you can say, for example, I will create a new file. I will say new file equals to new. I will use the file class and I will give the location or the name. So I will just say this is data3.txt, so that it will get created in the same root of the project folder. And then I will say new file and I will use the left shift operator, and this can be used directly in Groovy, the left shift operator here, and I will say my file dot text. So I want to get the text from my file and then give it into the new file, and that's it. I will save and run this, and if I refresh my project, I should have the new file created. I will refresh it and you can see we have data3.txt here. I will go to it and you can see all the data is here. So this is how you can copy data. And then finally, if you want to delete file, you can just say, for example, I want to delete this new file. I will say new file dot delete, and that's it. If I run this now, they should delete the new file. If I refresh my project, and you can see data3.txt is no longer there. And this is how you can use file IO and you can read your files in Groovy. In the next session, I will discuss how to write files. I hope this session was very useful for you. Thank you for watching.